When people come and speak to me about attending our church or another church, sometimes after a certain absence, they will very often speak about what it is that disturbs them about coming to church. What does it mean exactly to talk about resurrection? How do we understand Jesus to be the Son of God? If we find the truth within our own tradition, what does that say about other traditions? Is it a denial of them? All fascinating questions, well worth going into. I frequently do, either from this place, or in discussion with you privately, or in the small group that meets prior to our service every Sunday. Those are all interesting questions. None of them is actually a problem. Anything that engages our curiosity is no longer a problem. It's on the way to a solution and is therefore simply interesting. I always give that good news to people who are talking to me about perhaps becoming members of our congregation. Alas, in this case, I cannot give them, as I gave to you this morning, good news and better news. I frequently, in fact, withhold the bad news. The bad news is that if you join a congregation, there is something that's going to be demanded of you, and it actually will be tough, and it will cost, and you will not wish to do it. You're going to forgive one another. People are going to do things that you don't like, and life in congregation means you learn to deal with that. Jesus says this as plainly as it can be stated in today's Gospel from Matthew. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. It's one of the most difficult things we will ever do, is identify the source of the sense that we feel wrong to the person who actually did the wrong, so that we can use our power given us by Jesus to forgive. If we do so, we gain not only our brother, but also our own sense of integrity and the health of our congregation. Washington, D.C. is not good for very much right now, but it's great for this Sunday, because Washington, D.C. gives us a perfect example of what goes wrong when you don't do this. Imagine the field day Jesus could have had with a parable of someone who smiled in the meeting and smiled for the newspaper, and then immediately thereafter went to an interview on Fox News to complain about his brother. You never hear about what divides people person to person. Instead, you just blare it out in some other medium for a sense of personal advantage. But the truth is, it's the very opposite of advantage that is gained. The person that does not confront wrong where it happens cheapens himself and ultimately cheapens his community, whatever that community might be, whether it is the United States, part of its governments, the places where we work, or our congregations. The value of the congregation is that it is a place where we are reminded week after week of the values that we are called to. And therefore, though I hate to tell you this, we actually have less excuse than the people in Washington for not attending to the preaching of Jesus in this regard. Just as Jesus was not in a position to say, if your brother sins against you, don't go to an interview on television. So he's not in a position to say, if your brother sins against you, go tell the rector first. He doesn't say that, and yet, if you read what he says today, he does say that. What he does say is that it is the way in which we deal with the sense of wrong among us that the power of forgiveness is worked out. And in this gospel in particular, forgiveness is understood to be a power. These words that Jesus says here, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. These words are also precisely what he promises to St. Peter just 2 chapters earlier. Why? Because he wants us to understand that he is talking about a power which is individual, and St. Peter is taken as the example of that, and also collective, part of the operation of a congregation as a whole. The issue here is the link between what we do with one another and how that reflects the love of God. Jesus insists there is no power on earth or in hell bigger than that, which is why he says, the gates of Hades shall not prevail against this power of forgiveness. It is for that reason that Jesus concentrates on it, wants us to understand its true strength, and asks us to join him in not letting that power dissipate from us out of a sense of misplaced embarrassment or advantage. Now to God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, be ascribed as is most justly due, all might, majesty, dominion, and power, this day and forevermore.